"You're barren, Amy. You'll never be a mother." That's what my husband said to me. No hesitation, no emotion, just a statement over breakfast like he was commenting on the weather. 3 months later, he brought his pregnant mistress to dinner at the restaurant where he once proposed to me. That night, I placed a sealed envelope on the table between them. He opened it, read what was inside, and went pale. The woman beside him started to cry, and neither of them saw it coming. My name is Amy Hawthorne. I'm 38. I work in healthcare marketing and was married for 5 years to a man named Jeffrey. 41, a financial analyst, polished, well-spoken, and for a long time, convincing. We started trying for a baby after our 3rd anniversary. 2 years passed. No pregnancy, no answers. I saw specialists, took supplements, tracked every cycle. He said he was doing the same. Then one morning he looked across the kitchen table and told me the issue was me. He'd had tests done, he said. His fertility was fine. Mine wasn't. He showed me medical results on his phone, blurry charts I couldn't read before he quickly closed the screen. But what he didn't know was that I'd already had my own testing done, with a real doctor, with real results. Every indicator showed I was perfectly healthy, fertile. So no, I wasn't the one with a problem. But I didn't confront him. Not yet. Because his behavior had already started to change. Earlier mornings, showering at the gym, taking calls in his car with the engine running in the dead of winter. His wedding ring disappeared. I asked about it once. He said he was developing an allergy to metal. If any of this sounds familiar, if you've ever been blamed for someone else's choices, or felt something was off but didn't have the proof, stay with me. You might see parts of your own story here, and I'd like to hear yours. Have you ever been told something about yourself that turned out to be a lie, or been made to feel like the problem when you knew deep down you weren't? Let me know in the comments. Because what happened next wasn't just about betrayal. It was about taking control of the truth and handing it back piece by piece. And I was just getting started. I didn't confront Jeffrey right away. Instead, I watched. I started paying attention the way you do when you've been made to feel like you're losing your mind, when explanations don't add up, but you're not yet ready to call someone a liar. He started working later. Sometimes he'd come home at midnight, other times not until the next morning. Always a reason. A last-minute client dinner, a system outage, a team emergency. But his stories never lined up. The details were too clean, too rehearsed. He kept his phone face down and his laptop started living inside his locked office. One day I heard a faint beep from the hallway. He'd installed a digital keypad on the office door without telling me. I asked what it was for. "Client confidentiality," he said. "New compliance rules." We'd been married 5 years, and suddenly I wasn't trusted to walk past a spreadsheet. The truth was already sitting in my purse, sealed inside an envelope stamped with my doctor's name. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. Not until I knew what, or who, he was hiding. That answer came one evening in January. I was folding laundry when I picked up his dress shirt and a piece of paper slipped from the pocket. A receipt from a jewelry store. Pearl earrings, $1,340. I've never worn pearls. A week later, I watched him from our 3rd-floor window as he sat in his parked car during a snowstorm, engine running, talking on the phone. He stayed in that car for 40 minutes while the snow piled up around him. I knocked on the window, holding his coat. He didn't roll it down, just held up one finger and kept talking. Something had broken between us, and he was pretending not to notice. It wasn't just one lie. It was layers. He stopped eating the meals I cooked, claimed he wasn't hungry, that he had already eaten. But the takeout containers piling in the trash said otherwise. The man who used to praise my lasagna was now surviving on Sweetgreen and excuses. Then came the emails. He forgot to log out of the shared tablet, and curiosity or instinct led me to his inbox. One message was flagged purple, his personal, important label. The subject line, "Our Little Miracle, 12 weeks. Angela Morrison. She worked in accounting, blonde, polite, half my size. I remembered her from the office holiday party. She'd smiled at me like she didn't know who I was. Now I understood why. Her message was short. I know the timing isn't perfect, but I believe in us. This baby is our new beginning, 12 weeks pregnant. The timeline matched. That was when Jeffrey started sleeping in gym clothes and showering elsewhere, when the ring came off, when his guilt became harder to hide. I sat with that email for a long time. Not crying, not even angry, just still. And then I got up and I started collecting emails, receipts, calendar entries, photos of the gifts he bought her, screenshots of her messages. One by one, I compiled it all. Then I printed everything, organized it in a binder with labeled tabs, November, December, January. And I wasn't done. I remembered something. Jeffrey had surgery 2 years ago, a varicocele repair, a condition that can reduce male fertility. He said it was minor, nothing to worry about. He never followed up with testing afterward, so I called the clinic. "Hi, I'm Amy Hawthorne. My husband had a procedure here 2 years ago. I'm trying to locate any follow-up results." There weren't any. The surgery had been completed, but no post-op sperm analysis, no confirmation of fertility recovery. I didn't have to be a doctor to do the math. Angela was pregnant. Jeffrey hadn't proven he could father a child since that procedure. If anything, the evidence suggested he couldn't. So I added that to the binder. Not just betrayal, but betrayal built on a lie. He told me I was the broken one. But now I knew he wasn't just cheating on me. She might have been cheating on him too. The man who tried to blame me for everything didn't realize he was about to take the fall, for all of it. I made one more appointment with Dr. Young, just to confirm my results again. She ran the tests. Everything still looked perfect. She handed me an official printout with her signature and seal. "You're not only fertile, Amy. You're exceptionally healthy." I smiled for the first time in weeks, because now I had what I needed. Not to fight, to finish. By February, I had everything. Every receipt, every email, every lie cataloged and printed. But I didn't want confrontation behind closed doors. Not this time. Jeffrey had controlled the narrative for months, spinning half-truths, rewriting our story. If he was going to hear the truth, I wanted him to hear it with witnesses. So I waited. And then, as if the universe had a sense of humor, he handed me the perfect setting. Dinner Friday night at La Bernardine. 7 p.m. Important news to share. Please don't be late, La Bernardine. The restaurant where he'd proposed to me 6 years ago. The one with white linens, candlelight, and a maitre d', who still remembered our names. A place once filled with promise. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. And then came the second text. Actually bringing someone you should meet. Hope that's okay. He didn't even bother to hide it. He was bringing Angela, pregnant, glowing, and still believing in the fantasy Jeffrey had promised her. I didn't respond. Instead, I began preparing, but not like a woman getting ready for a romantic evening. I prepared like a woman going to court. First, I retrieved the binder from where I'd hidden it, at my sister Carol's apartment in Lincoln Park, tucked behind winter coats in the hall closet. I removed the documents and slid them into a clean, thick manila envelope. I placed Dr. Young's letter right on top, highlighted in yellow. Then came the rest. Fertility reports with her signature and seal. Credit card statements showing dinners for 2 at restaurants he claimed made him sick. Receipts from Victoria's Secret, jewelry stores, email exchanges with Angela. And finally, one photograph, her ultrasound, with the caption, 12 weeks, our little miracle. I closed the envelope, took a deep breath, and slid it into my purse. I chose my outfit deliberately. The black dress Jeffrey had bought me for my last birthday, the one he said made me look elegant. I wore it with the pearl earrings I had inherited from my grandmother. Real pearls, not the ones he gave to someone else. Hair down, makeup clean, not dramatic. Just enough to remind him I was still the woman he once stood beside in front of our families and said, for better or worse. At 6:45, I arrived at the restaurant. The maitre d' greeted me with recognition and warmth. "Mrs. Hawthorne, welcome back. Mr. Hawthorne requested a private corner booth." I smiled, calm and direct. "I'd prefer that table by the window, please." Right in the center, he hesitated, then nodded. Of course. I sat, ordered a glass of water, and waited. At exactly 7 p.m., they walked in. Jeffrey was in his best charcoal suit. Angela beside him, her hand lightly resting on his arm, her belly unmistakably visible beneath a fitted blue dress. Her makeup was perfect. Her eyes scanned the room. Then she saw me, and her smile faltered. Jeffrey didn't smile. He nodded. Amy, this is Angela from my office. I thought it was time you met. I stood and pulled out her chair for her. You must be tired. Please sit. Angela mumbled a thank you and lowered herself into the seat. Jeffrey sat between us, placing himself in control, or so he thought. He ordered wine, paused, and corrected himself. Actually, just 2 glasses. Angela can't drink, I lifted mine. To new beginnings, I said, and to truth. We clinked glasses. The sound was small but sharp. Jeffrey cleared his throat. Amy, this isn't easy. But we need to talk about the future. Given your situation? I tilted my head. My situation? Angela leaned forward, trying to sound sympathetic. Jeffrey told me about your diagnosis. I'm so sorry. That must be devastating. I reached into my purse, pulled out the envelope, and placed it squarely on the table. Then you should both see this. Jeffrey's smile froze. Angela's brow furrowed. He opened the envelope slowly. As he pulled out the first page, my fertility report, his face began to change. Each page told a different part of the truth. Dr. Young's notes, the receipts, the emails, the ultrasound. Angela leaned over to look. What is this? She asked. My test results, I said. Dated 2 weeks ago. I'm not barren. I'm in the 95th percentile for fertility. Jeffrey, you lied. Jeffrey's jaw tightened. That's not... I cut him off. And you, Angela, did he tell you he had surgery 2 years ago for a condition that severely reduces sperm motility? Did he tell you he never went back for follow-up testing? Angela's face went pale. She turned to him. You said you were fine. I am, Jeffrey snapped. No, I said calmly. You assumed. That baby you're carrying, there's a good chance it's not his. Angela sat back like she'd been slapped. Jeffrey's hand trembled. What are you saying? I'm saying you built this on a lie and now it's all coming down. The restaurant had gone quiet. I stood, slid my chair back gently and looked at both of them. I'll leave you to your dinner. You have a lot to discuss. Then I turned, walked out into the cold Chicago night, and didn't look back. I walked out of La Bernardine and into the cold Chicago night without looking back. I didn't need to. I already knew what I'd left behind. Inside, Jeffrey was sitting in the ruins of his own performance, Angela sobbing into her napkin. The envelope, my quiet bomb, lay open on the table between them, its contents as undeniable as the winter air outside. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I got in a cab, sat upright, and gave the driver my sister Carol's address. The next morning, I met with my attorney. Patricia Chin was calm, brilliant, and direct. Everything I needed. I handed her the folder and told her what happened. She didn't blink. Well, she said, flipping through the pages, he brought his pregnant mistress to your anniversary restaurant while falsely accusing you of infertility? She closed the file. Judges hate that kind of thing. I nodded. I don't want his money. I just want out. You'll get out, she said. But you're also going to get what's fair. You supported him through business school. You moved to this city for his career. You gave up your own advancement for his. Don't erase yourself now, just because you're done with him. She was right. I had almost forgotten how much I'd given up, how many times I had made myself smaller to keep the marriage intact. That day, I stopped doing that. The divorce moved fast. Jeffrey didn't fight. Not once. He signed every paper with the stiff detachment of a man who knew the tide had already swallowed him. His reputation at work, damaged. His story with Angela, over. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she moved back to Indiana to live with her parents. Her baby, confirmed through a paternity test, wasn't his. David from accounting had a lot to explain. Jeffrey tried to save face, but he was unraveling. I stopped checking his social media, stopped asking around. He became background noise, faded. And me? I moved out of that apartment in the West Loop and found a smaller place in Lincoln Park. South-facing balcony, quiet street, enough sunlight for a few potted herbs. The first morning in my new place, I stood barefoot in the kitchen, pouring coffee into the mug that had survived everything, the one from my grandmother, glued back together piece by piece, a reminder of what can break and still hold. For weeks, I didn't rush. No calendars covered in fertility notes, no tension between two people avoiding eye contact. Just me, in a space I didn't have to shrink inside. I went back to work. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I presented at a healthcare marketing conference in late spring. It felt strange at first, putting on real shoes, standing in front of a crowd again, but when I started speaking, something clicked back into place. That's where I met Mark. He was a pediatrician, tall, steady, kind. He asked smart questions during my talk, not flirtatious, just curious. Afterward, we ended up at the same table during the networking dinner. He asked me what brought me to the conference, and I told him the truth, stripped of drama but not of detail. I told him about the false diagnosis, the envelope, the fallout. He didn't flinch. Instead, he laughed. Your ex told you you were the problem? And he never got retested after a surgery that affects male fertility? I nodded. He shook his head, smiling. Lady, you could probably get pregnant just from walking past a maternity ward. I laughed for real then, for the first time in a long time. Not because of him, but because I finally could. We started slow. No big promises, no future planning. Just walks by the lake, quiet dinners, a shared appreciation for silence that didn't come with suspicion. Mark never once made me feel like I had to prove myself. He didn't sleep in gym clothes. He didn't hide behind meetings. When he said, "I'll call you," he did. One afternoon in July, I planted tomatoes on my balcony, Cherokee purples, sun golds, a small garden. Nothing fancy. But it was mine. And something about putting my hands in the soil, watching something grow that had no agenda, no manipulation, just light, water, and time, felt healing in a way therapy hadn't quite reached. I didn't tell Mark right away about the tomatoes. I waited until they came in. Then I handed him one and said, "Try this." He bit into it and smiled. Sweet. Truth usually is, I said. That night I looked around my apartment, the books, the plants, the windows open to summer air, and realized I had built something. Not just a life, a home, not a single lie holding it up. Summer turned to early fall, and for the first time in years, I didn't dread the changing seasons. I had rhythm again, my own rhythm. Mornings with coffee and sunrise, work that challenged me, evenings with Mark or just myself and a good book. No tension, no second guessing, no lying awake, rehearsing conversations that never went the way they should. Then, one afternoon in October, I got a text. "Amy, can we talk?" From a number I hadn't seen in months, but still knew by heart. Jeffrey. I stared at the screen for a long minute. Not because I didn't expect this. I had, eventually. Men like him don't lose control easily. When they do, they often circle back, not out of love, but out of confusion. They want to see if the door's still open, if they still matter. I didn't reply. 2 days later, an email arrived. The subject line was one word: closure. He wrote that he had made mistakes, that things had moved too fast with Angela, that he had believed her pregnancy was a sign, a second chance at life, he called it. But after everything collapsed, he realized he'd burned the one bridge that mattered. He asked if we could meet for coffee. Just to talk, no pressure. I deleted the email, not in anger, just with finality. There was nothing he could give me that I hadn't already found on my own. But he wasn't finished. That Friday, I saw him outside my office building. He was leaning against the wall by the parking garage, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had simply grown. "Amy," he said as I walked toward my car, "just give me 5 minutes." I stopped, looked him in the eye. "You don't have 5 minutes anymore." His mouth opened, closed again. "I know I hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I just—" He searched for the words. "I wanted you to know I was wrong." I let the silence sit. "I lied," he said. "I was scared I was the problem." After the surgery, I didn't want to face it. Then Angela. It all happened so fast. I didn't nod. I didn't soften. "I blamed you because I couldn't deal with what I was. You didn't deserve any of it." I looked at him, the man I once shared a life with. The man I once tried to carry through disappointment, through 2 years of negative tests, through countless small rejections dressed up as routine. "You told me I was broken," I said. "That's not something you get to walk back with a 5-minute conversation." "I know," he said, voice quieter now, "but I needed you to hear it." "That it wasn't you," I shook my head. "I knew it wasn't me before you ever said a word. That's the difference between us. You need other people to tell you who you are." "I don't." He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. I watched him hesitate, half hoping for something, half realizing it wouldn't come. I opened my car door. "Take care, Jeffrey," I said. "And if you ever wonder what real closure looks like, this is it." Then I got in and drove away. I didn't cry. I didn't replay the conversation later or rewrite it in my head. I went home, watered my tomato plants, and took a long shower with the windows cracked just enough to let in the early October air. That night, Mark came over. I didn't tell him about Jeffrey right away. We made dinner together, baked salmon and roasted squash, and watched an old black and white movie on the couch wrapped in a blanket too big for one person. When the movie ended, I told him. Mark didn't overreact. He just listened, then nodded. "Do you feel lighter?" he asked. I thought about it. "I don't feel anything," I said, "and that's how I know I'm finally free." He smiled, kissed the top of my head, and we sat there in the quiet, letting the world be still around us. Because sometimes the final word doesn't come from slamming a door, it comes from no longer needing to open it. The last thing I ever said to Jeffrey was, "Take care." I didn't need him to suffer. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to never explain myself to that man again. And that, it turns out, was enough. The days after felt quiet in the right ways. No more rechecking my phone. No more rewriting conversations in my head. No more waking up already tired. That's how I knew I'd really left. When peace didn't feel like a reward, but like the new normal. I started noticing things. Small things. The way the morning light came through the curtains, the sound my shoes made on the kitchen tiles, how tomatoes smelled when I watered them in the afternoon sun. None of this was spectacular, but all of it was mine. Mark stayed in my life, gently, like someone who understood I wasn't rebuilding, I was reclaiming. He never treated me like something broken. He just met me where I was, and waited. One Sunday, we were walking by the lake when he asked, "If you had the chance to erase it all, would you?" I thought for a moment. Then I said, "No," because that would mean erasing the woman I am now, too. He didn't ask anything more. He just nodded and held my hand. Later that evening, I caught myself humming while I chopped herbs for dinner, and I smiled, because I used to be someone who walked on eggshells. Now I hum when I cook. That's healing. Not dramatic, not loud, just consistent. So if you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. And if any part of this felt like your own story, even in some small way, then maybe it's time to make space for more of these conversations. This isn't about bitterness, it's about clarity. It's about knowing that silence doesn't always mean weakness, and leaving isn't always loud. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, about quiet strength, second chances, and starting over without shame, subscribe. I'm not here to shout, just to speak plainly, and if that's the kind of space you're looking for, you're already in the right place. Leave a comment if this touched something in you, or just say, I'm still here. Sometimes that's enough, because moving on isn't about forgetting. It's about no longer needing the past to explain who you are. I don't tell this story to look back. I tell it so someone else knows they can move forward too. And now? I don't need closure. I have roots. I don't chase peace. I grow it. I water my plants. I hum when I cook. And I wake up in a life I chose, not one I tolerated. That's more than healing. That's freedom.